Tuesday night was a big night for Democrats in the Great Lakes states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. The Democratic candidates for governor and Senate swept those states only 2 years after Donald Trump picked them up, essentially knocking down that blue wall back then. But Democrats were less victorious in neighboring Ohio, where the state elected only one Democrat to statewide office. That would be Senator Sherrod Brown, who was reelected to his third Senate term. Here he is on election night.
You all showed the country that progressives can win and win decisively in the heartland. And you showed the country by putting people first and by honoring the dignity of work. We carry a state that Donald Trump won by almost double digits. We as progressives we celebrate the dignity of all work. When we fight for workers, we fight for all people, whether you punch a clock or swipe a badge, whether you work for tips or you work for a salary, whether you're raising children or you're taking care of an aging parent. And as we celebrate the dignity of work, we unify, we will not divide.
So how did a progressive Democrat win in a state that voted for Donald Trump by double digits? For more, I'm joined by the man himself, the newly elected senator from Ohio, Sherrod Brown. It seems to me that an old labor guy once said this to a senator I knew who had betrayed him. He said, you know, you dance with the one that brung you. The people that built the Democratic Party in this country are working people of all backgrounds. The working people that build things, the people that worked in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. It's always been Democratic territory. Trump stole it. He grabbed it, I should say, 2 years ago. How do you get it back?
Well, you get it back by talking about the dignity of work. I think you point out this sort of phony populism of Donald Trump, where he talks about working class voters, but he divides them.
Does he know any?
Yeah, he probably doesn't know too many of them. Number one, number two, the White House looks like a retreat for Wall Street executives, but he has put this phony populism out there, and real populism isn't racist. Real populism isn't anti-Semitic. Real populism doesn't push people down. It lifts people up. It doesn't divide workers. It doesn't call people names. And a campaign against Donald Trump is you put up his phony populism that's really for Wall Street against real populism that's for workers. And as I said there, when you talk about workers, you're talking about all workers, whether you punch a clock, whether you work for a salary, whether you're working at a hospital, working construction, or
that's how Bill Clinton won. Bill Clinton won in '92. He said he's for the people that work hard and play by the rules. He's looking for the regular guy who does 50 hours of work, comes home, has a beer, watches a little TV,
should be able to get ahead
about his family.
Should be able to get ahead if you work all your life and you've followed the ruals and you've contributed to your community. You ought to have a secure retirement.
Well, here's the upshot. We really don't. Here's the bad news about the failure to meet that goal. 52%, I believe the latest number is 52% of people who don't have a college degree were for Trump, and 52% of people with a college degree are for the Democrats. How did the Democratic Party become the party of gown, and the Republican Party the party of the townies, the regular people? How'd that happen? Well, they flipped.
It happened because Democrats weren't listening well enough. I think Democrats on trade and tax policy. I mean, we have seen the business plan, and you and I have talked about this, and you've talked about this lots of times when I've seen your show. We have followed we have encouraged business through trade and tax policy to shut down production in Mansfield or Dayton, Ohio, and move overseas and collect a tax break. And it's a tax policy, it's a trade policy. We haven't looked out for workers. This town, frankly, doesn't really understand the dignity of work. I was talking to a group of about 200 Teamsters last night in Washington, right around the time I saw you coming off your show, and talking about their pensions. And these workers understand the dignity of work. We've got to reach them. We've got to speak to them where they are. They've worked all their lives. They believe that Washington doesn't even understand the collective bargaining process. You give up money today. You're a worker in Philadelphia. You're at the bargaining table with your union. You give up money today to put aside for the future.
You don't have to make the announcement here, although I'd like you to make the announcement when you do decide about running for president, because I've always thought you fit the uniform of who should run. How do you be tough against Trump without getting down into the crap hole with him? How do you? Marco Rubio tried to get dirty with him. It didn't work. He made a fool of himself. How do you stand up there? Like if you're debating him on television and he comes up like this galoot behind you and looms over the back and pulls those kind of numbers, how do you show you're tougher than he is without becoming like him?
Well, I think in the primary, he called them all names and they called them names back. And that's not the way. You don't make it personal. I don't use the president's name very often, but I do talk about the interest groups that control him. I had a bill in Congress that I handed to the president at the White House. It's the Patriot Corporation Act. It says simply, we've talked about it on the show, it says simply if companies pay their workers well and benefits and make their production here, they get a lower tax rate. If they pay their workers $8 or $10, they're levied a corporate freeloader fee because those workers get Medicaid, those workers get housing vouchers and food stamps. So you challenge this president. You make that contrast. His phony populism that calls names and degrades people and pushes people down versus the real populism of supporting workers. It's a pretty simple argument.
I hope you run.
You don't do it by
reason,
name calls. Calling.
I want you to run because I want somebody to stand up to Trump with working people.
Well, that's
and take them back.
what I've tried to do for my whole
Because you
career.
The one that you brung.
Well,
brung you. Anyway, thanks
well
so much,
said.
Sherrod Brown. Senator.
Thanks, Chris.
Senator again from Ohio.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.